Welcome to State of the State. I'm Darlene DeRezzo, and I'm in conversation with Spencer Dickinson. He is running for Congress in District 2. Welcome, Spencer.
Glad to be here,
Spencer.
Darlene.
So this is not your first time here. You were once in this chair.
Well, that's right. Full disclosure, I used to do this show covering for John sometimes when he was out of town. And you know, my method of starting the show is completely different. We didn't sit there quietly. I'd bring the guest in and I'd start a conversation with them. And we'd get all interested in what's going on. We'd get, halfway through the topic after about 15 minutes, and then somebody else, like the producer, would come in and say, be quiet for about a minute. So we'd stop for a few seconds, and then we'd pick up where we left off. But I've noticed that your style's a little different. We're just going to wait quietly, and then we're going to start. Okay, so here we are.
And so here we are. You have been in office previously in Rhode Island, correct?
I served a total of 12 years in the legislature. And this is all about telling stories, so let me tell you one story, and this is outrageous, but it happens to be the truth. And it's a kind of a challenge to reporters out there, journalists. Check this out, find out if I'm telling the truth, look up the details. I'm only going to tell you part of the story. My first year in the legislature, the biggest bill that was passed, other than the budget, but the biggest piece of legislation we passed that year had one signature on it, no co-sponsors. It was about that thick, and it was really important. It had one sponsor, a freshman legislator, me. Now, there could be a reason for that, but that's the truth.
What was that?
Well, that's the thing. I'm leaving it to the journalists to do the research and figure it out. It's a little bit of a challenge.
A cliffhanger, a treasure hunt for our audience.
I need journalists covering this election, because otherwise I don't have a chance.
Okay. Why do you say that?
Well, because everybody knows it's all about money. And the other candidates have a big head start.
Money in terms of a budget for promotions?
The budget that they exactly. It's TV time and that type of thing. They've got, the other candidates have it, a couple of candidates in particular, and I don't. I'm not, or at least if I have access to it, I'm not going to reach in my pocket and get that kind of money. So it's the only chance I have is if it becomes a subject that people want to write about. And so that's my little teaser to start with.
Okay, so
why did one freshman legislator have one signature on the biggest bill to pass this year? And the point that particular year, the point of that really is that I think experience in the legislative process is important, and I think what you bring to the job is important. And I bring 12 years of experience of making things happen in the legislature.
What year was that?
1973. I'm an old man.
Okay, so we have to look up the year 1973. We have to look up the legislation and, right.
It passed the House and Senate.
Passed.
It was the biggest piece of legislation that passed that
look.
year. Now you can look it up and find out that I'm lying, and that'll be the end of my campaign.
What was your biggest accomplishment at the time you were previously in office?
This is a tough one, but in my 12 years in the legislature, I worked with 6 different speakers, 7 if you count Joe DeAngelis. He was not speaker when I was there. He was majority leader when I was there. That's a lot of speakers for 12 years. Part of the reason for that was that myself and maybe a couple of other new people that were elected felt that those speakers weren't necessarily doing the job for the people, and it was time to move them. So one of my difficulties in politics is that maybe I didn't make all the right friends, but I will not lie to you. I will not lie to you as a voter, and I will work for you. This sometimes throws up a few obstacles in my political path, but I keep doing it anyhow.
Okay, wait, did we get an answer to that question? I'm sorry.
And the question was,
what was your biggest accomplishment? What do you feel like?
I think my biggest accomplishment was influencing who the speakers were and when it was time to move on. And I think that some of them will remember all too well. And that could be part of some of the obstacles I face in politics.
Okay. And so what have you been doing since leaving office?
Well, I'm a home builder, and I'm very proud of the fact that, as I mentioned, I'm an environmentalist, and I'm also super concerned about global warming. I think it's real. And many years ago, I built the first solar heated house.
In Rhode Island?
In the world. Or, it's definitely in Rhode Island, but it was the first 100% solar heated house in a cold climate. And I got a lot of publicity for that, built quite a few of them. And I learned a couple things about business, and I learned about some of the obstacles that we face. The oil companies didn't like what I was doing. And it's funny because I used to go around to these groups and people would ask me to come and talk, and I'd get up in front of the group to talk, and there'd be a couple of guys in dark suits sitting in the back row just following everything I did. And it turned out they were from the electric company, or they were from somebody who really didn't want us to succeed. But yeah, so I'm a home builder, and that's been, that's what takes up my time. I've got a family, 4 kids, same girlfriend for 50 years, my wife, grandchildren now. I got my hands full.
So what led you to politics initially?
If you look at your book of ancient history, you might find that at the time that I first got involved in politics, the Vietnam War was a big issue. And I had been in the Army. I spent a couple of years in the Army. But that didn't keep me from realizing that what Vietnam War was a problem. And that's actually what drew me into politics, working for George McGovern. Part of my credentials as a Democrat is that I was a delegate to the convention. And I've got to, just because it's important based on what I'm doing right now, I have been a deputy majority leader in the House. I've been chair of the Senate Majority Leader's nomination committee. I've had political roles that should make me an insider. But some of the problems with being an insider is that there's some other insiders that are inconvenienced by it. And you don't always get the endorsement or the nomination that you'd like to get.
And have you always been with the Democratic Party?
Yes.
And what changes have you seen in the Democratic Party since you've been in politics or been in office?
Okay, that's a very good question. I like to say that right now I think what we need to do is restore the party of JFK.
So what does that mean
and
for our viewers?
JFK did not try to irritate moms and dads by trying to teach kids pronouns that aren't even in the language. JFK didn't tear down statues of Columbus and Thomas Jefferson.
Well, what did the party represent then that you don't see it representing now?
And JFK did not preside over a chaotic open border, which I don't think anybody in this country really likes. And that's that seems to be the trademark of the Democratic Party today. And what I would like to do, whether I win this primary or not, is I'd like to help some old-time Democrats or traditional Democrats focus on bringing the party back to a moderate level, which I'm afraid it has drifted far to the left from. And the journalists, get out there and do your job and tell me I'm wrong, but I think that the other 5 candidates that I'm running against are all proud to be progressives, and they're woke. And I think that's not going to help the party. That's going to destroy the party and marginalize the party in the upcoming election and in the presidential election that's going to follow it. I think what we have to do is we've got to take back the party, bring it back to where the average Democrat would like to see it. And there's so much we can accomplish.
So let me just pause you here. So what you're saying is that the party of JFK or the Democratic Party of JFK was more moderate. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Okay, so you're saying that. And you want to see the Democratic Party go back in that direction under your leadership?
Yes. Okay,
so specifically, what would you like to see happen, and what do you intend to do if you are elected?
Well,
so you're saying that the Democratic Party has gone a little too left. You want to bring it closer to the middle.
Yeah.
I got that right? Okay. So specifically, what do you think you can do to make that happen?
Well, the price of not doing that, first of all, is that we start losing elections. And let's say we lose this one in Rhode Island. Regardless of who gets elected in this primary, they're going to have to face Alan Fung. And if the people think Alan Fung is more moderate and more centrist than the Democratic candidate, we're going to send a Republican.
Do you think he is?
There's nothing. Well, I'm not sure I'm ready to comment on where he stands right now. Ask me. Let's come back here on September 14th. If I get elected, we'll talk about Alan Fung.
Okay.
In the meantime, I think he's on his own for a while. But what we're doing, if we give this up, is giving up our chance to deal with some serious issues that we should be dealing with at the national level. And just to mention a couple of them, we need to preserve Social Security. We need to be thinking about international issues such as nuclear disarmament. The current situation in the Ukraine should be tipping us off to the fact that we could have some serious problems if we don't go down that road to effectively eliminate nuclear arms, or at least contain them with some effective means of getting them offline. As long as they're right online, and you've got somebody like the president, the leader of Russia right now, we could be in some trouble. And if we don't pick up the clue on that and start doing something about it, it could be 20 years, 100 years, 200 years, but something's going to go wrong and we're going to blow this planet up. That's a serious problem. A couple of more mundane issues, more day-to-day issues. We still have a lot of work to do on healthcare, which I think is important. And as I said, I'm very serious about my concern for global warming. I think we have to deal with it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that the Democratic Party is interested in doing. And if we don't do it, it very possibly won't get done. Mm-hmm. On top of that, we've got to take the border seriously, and we can't let the Republicans be the party that says close the border. I say close the border. Mm-hmm.
So I want to come back to those topics. So you see those topics at a national level, correct? Yeah. Okay. So what can you do in your position at the state level? Anything?
Interestingly, yes, because the congressperson has an opportunity to clear the path and smooth out the road for people doing things on a local basis. And for example, I know that the previous guest was Jeb Ruggiero, and I know that she's interested in healthcare. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I have looked at that issue myself while in the legislature. It's extremely complicated. It could be done for the state of Rhode Island, but it's going to take some interference at the national level. So in effect, a congressperson who's running interference for the local person, be it a legislator or a governor or lieutenant governor, who's championing that issue, they're going to need help at the local level. There's so many other things that need doing.
Well, let's talk about the economy in Rhode Island, right? So can you do anything about the economy? I mean, look at what happened with Eleanor Slater, right? So there was a whistleblower there at Eleanor Slater. And this cost the state how much? Do you know how much?
I don't know, was it $158 million?
I thought it was $500 million. I could be wrong. I had the statistics.
Maybe I'm only thinking about 1 year, but it was a lot.
It was a lot. And that money has to go back. And Rhode Island is the only state in the country that does not have its own psychiatric hospital. So speaking of healthcare.
Well, now you know about this because that's your field.
Yes. But what about economic development in this state? Look what happened with Paw Sox.
You've mentioned two things.
And then what about the Superman building?
Okay, these are all, no, this is, I like the fact that this shows a half an hour. We need 3 hours. I know a little bit about these issues. Mm-hmm. The first two you mentioned, Eleanor Slater and the Paw Sox, I think that was ineptitude on the part of, a fellow Democrat.
Right, but setting that aside, what can someone in your position do, like, to help Rhode Islanders with issues like this?
Well, by the way, I haven't given up on bringing the Paw Sox back.
Good, okay.
It ain't over till the fat leaders. I don't play baseball, I'm too old.
Are you a Red Sox fan?
But, of course, I'm a Paw Sox fan. Mm-hmm. And I say we're bringing them back. It may take a while. And exactly how does a congressman do that? Well, I have a few ideas about that.
Tell us.
But I can't tell everything. I can't tell you everything the first time we talk. You mentioned the Superman building. I didn't have that on my list of things to talk about today, but it's a bad idea. And part of the reason
to get that revitalized?
We should save the building. It's a very important part of Providence, and we need it.
It's empty.
But, of course it is. But why is it empty? Who emptied it, and why did they empty it? What was their expectation? Were they planning on their profit, or maybe doubling their profit based on?
Do you have the answers to any of those questions?
I might.
Tell us.
Because I can't necessarily.
Okay, well, you're here on the show and you haven't told us anything. You haven't told us what's up your sleeve.
I'm giving you topics, and I'm hoping that we'll draw some journalists into some of these questions. And when they look into the questions.
So here I am asking you these questions. You want another journalist to come in and ask you the questions?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly what I want. I want
They're
some of these
going to get the
issues.
answer, and I'm not going to get the answer?
I'm not, well, it's interesting fact here, okay? We've got 6 candidates running for Congress. I have spent a lot of time in the legislature, and I actually know some of the players. I can't sit here and name names about things that I am 99% sure of. Give me a commission and subpoena power, and we'll bring some stuff out. But that may not happen right away. If I am in a position to talk to Nancy Pelosi and maybe give her my vote, one of the things I'm going to say is, would you consider sending the Oversight Committee to Rhode Island to smoke out some of these issues?
We
that have
have
been
an
hidden for so
oversight
many
committee
years?
in Rhode Island.
And I was on it for a while. It didn't function. And the reason
Well-
it didn't function was that the speaker controls the membership, and the membership holds back.
Well, is it that it doesn't function, or that there's no power behind it? Or there's no,
The power's there if the speaker wants it to be, and my experience has been that the speaker often does not want it to be. So if you're a Rhode Island voter and you suspect that some of these things aren't functioning the way they're supposed to, and that they bring about economic problems, you're probably right.
okay, so no definitive answer on what you're going to do about the economic state of Rhode Island, or economic state. How about the Second Amendment? Where do you stand on the Second Amendment?
I am pro-Second Amendment. I am a Second Amendment supporter.
Okay, so what do you think of the legislation? So right now we have a magazine. Right now, there's legislation that in 6 months or so, you can only carry a magazine with 10 rounds, right? 1 in the chamber and 10 rounds, correct?
That's my
So
understanding.
everyone with a larger magazine are going to be felons soon.
It's a felony, yeah.
Right, so what do you see happening here? What would you like to see happen here? I mean, what makes a magazine with 10 rounds any safer than a magazine with 15 rounds? You know, do you know how long a gunfight is if you had to defend yourself? Do you know how many shots are fired?
Well, you know, I do know some of the answers to these questions. I did.
Oh, are we going to get the answers?
No. Well, because there may not be the kind of answer you're looking for. But you know, I spent a couple of years in the Army. The Army spent about $200,000 putting me on the firing range for 8 weeks, and then again for 6 weeks.
Okay.
One of the things that's frustrating to gun owners and Second Amendment supporters is that the discussion that takes place about the Second Amendment and about the problem of gun violence is the people who take part in it don't bother to educate themselves, and they really only irritate other people by just being...
Which people don't bother to educate
The
themselves?
people who supported the legislation that you were just now talking about.
Okay.
They don't really they don't see it in perspective. And I just, you know, let me just put it this way. There are probably 300 million firearms in this country. That could be a low number. It's almost as many as there are people. If you have a problem today with, say, gun violence in schools, and it's something you're concerned about, if your solution is to take away 300 million guns, it's probably a bad solution because it is not going to happen. You know, you could establish a policy at the federal level even with, you know, even a unanimous vote from Congress, and you're going to say, we're going to take away 10%. It wouldn't happen.
Do you think that taking away guns is the answer?
Well, you know, even if it were the answer, it's probably not
or
the
limiting capacity, limiting you know, the ammunition capacity in a magazine. You think that's the answer?
Well, one of the problems with that is that it really has no serious effect on the problem. And what it does do is it develops a generation of people who are opposed to working on, you know, say, rational measures dealing with firearms. And there are all kinds of ideas out there. I'd like to get things done in the legislature. I don't consider that those 3 bills got anything done. They make people feel better, and unfortunately there are politicians who exploit those issues and say, you know, let's do this, let's take away the 20-round magazine. Let's, you know, whatever. But the thing is that all it does is it consolidates and it turns the Second Amendment supporters into super advocates against anything that you want to do. And they're right, because I've had a lot of conversations with some of the gun control advocates, essentially deep down inside, they want to take away all weapons. Number one, that's probably a bad idea in terms of preserving a free country. And the other thing is, it can't be done, it won't be done. And if that's your solution, your problem is not going to go away.
Well, let me ask you this. What do you think is underlying the rise in gun violence, and what do you think the solution is?
Well, it's a society thing, and probably, better families would go a long way, better mental health.
How do you think we get to better families?
But I would.
Let me just ask you.
That's a good question.
Yeah, how do you think we get to better families? And is there something that you can do if you were elected to Congress to make that happen?
Probably every day you have a little tiny decision that you have to make that leads you down that road. But I just want to say, as a legislator, I found that you can get things done, but sometimes you have to look at where the obstacles are. And I remember Claiborne Pell once said, he got things done by letting the other guy have his way. Or in effect, having Claiborne Pell's way. He let them have his way. Now, I don't know if it's a question of, deceiving people into thinking that they're doing something. But I think that just as an experiment, I would like to see, let's identify 20 or 30 gun clubs in Rhode Island, and let's have a convention. And let's do this open-mindedly. Let's get the gun club owners, who, in my experience, on a personal level, are very solid, intelligent people. And I mean that. I'm not just saying that because I'm running for office. Get them together, ask them for a package of legislation that deals with the problem of gun violence. And they might bring you back something that has nothing, they might bring you back a whole package of things. But I wouldn't be surprised if part of that package included things that had nothing to do with firearms themselves. And it might be just the answer to your question.
What you're saying is underlying this rise in gun violence.
Sorry, say that again?
You think that their answers or their proposals might touch upon what's underlying the gun violence?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, and one of the things that is really a shame is that every time one of these incidents happens, it becomes a thing. It becomes part of our culture, and it plants the seed of the idea in the head of an unstable person. And 50 years ago, those unstable people didn't turn on their TV every couple of weeks and look at a gun violence situation. It didn't occur to them. Today, now I'm not saying we stifle free press, because I don't have an answer to this one, but it really is a shame that we have to make such a big thing out of it, because we're only planting the idea in the head of an unstable person. Now, of course, that unstable person shouldn't have access to firearms, their mother shouldn't buy it, their parents shouldn't give it to them when they're 16. No, these are all things that are pretty obvious, and that may not even solve the problem. But I think that my guess is that there are some actual things that can be done that would move us in the direction. And if you really care about gun violence as an issue, you're going to think about it this way. If all you want to do is promote yourself as a politician, you'll bring about, you'll go for the emotion, and you'll say weapon of war, or something like that, which gun owners and people who understand firearms realize is pretty much a meaningless term.
All right. So, you want to say anything about pensions?
Pensions, gosh, I hope we have time.
We do.
Because this is really important.
We're going to make time.
It relates to the issue of the Rhode Island economy. 11 years ago, Rhode Island passed a pension reform bill, which...
Who passed it?
It was passed by the state legislature, and it was promoted by the treasurer, who...
Does that mean that the people voted on it?
No.
Okay, so...
The treasurer at the time brought it with her from New York. And as I understand it, the plan, which was like a battle plan to accomplish a goal, was written by Helena Folks' husband. Now again, journalists out there, if I'm wrong, let's write the article and tell me I'm wrong about this. But the plan was brought, and it was executed military style by Speaker Gordon Fox. And the outcome was that some of the benefits of the pension plan, some of the requirements for retirement were changed. But the key thing that happened was they took away cost of living adjustment. Very important term. And let's rephrase that. Dollar value adjustment. And it happens that I did a little...
Well, that's important too, because, we are living a lot longer. We need that adjustment. Right?
Of course we do. And the people who are suffering the most in the Rhode Island economy today, and if there are any of them out there, are teachers, state employees. Let's say, and I did a little calculation the other night, if you retired in 2011, the year that pension reform was passed and that the cost of living allowance was taken away, let's say that your pension was, pick a number. You know, you
100,000.
Well, unfortunately, the number I have is 39,000.
Okay, 39,000.
But if you, well, hey, I can in a second.
You didn't ask me to read your mind.
We might have 30 seconds of dead time. I'd have to do the calculation. But in order to have the same purchasing power that you had 10 years ago, you'd have to be pulling in as part of your pension $51,881. From 39 to basically 52,000. Which really means that the money you spend on groceries, you've got to spend $13 for what you spent $10 on. That goes for your car, your fuel, heating your house, everything. And the inflation problem was totally predictable.
So many of those recipients would be living in poverty at some point, is what you're saying.
In effect, there's no question about it. And there's legislation, and when the legislation was passed, it was kind of a patch job. Look it up. This is an example. This includes the legislation. This is a bill that was put in this year. But if you find the paragraph where it describes whether or not you get your COLA, basically what the legislature did was say that unless the pension fund reaches a certain level, you don't get the COLA. Now, we've had 11 years, and that pension fund has not reached the level where the cost of living adjustment can be restored. So we have not lived up to our obligation. You know, when we did it, for one thing.
And so where is all this extra money then? I mean, if this money isn't going into cost of living increase, where's it going?
It's a funny thing you should ask that question, because I happen to have a book here. The name of the book is How to Steal a Lot of Money Legally, written by my friend, he's become my friend, Ted Seidel. Ted Seidel says that in the last 10 years, $3 billion, and in contrast to our $10 billion pension fund, $3 billion has gone to hedge fund managers and other people who advise the pension fund that didn't have to go to them. And that in the next 10 years, the same thing will happen. If we don't find out what's in the contracts with the hedge fund, the Wall Street fund managers, and if you were responsible for the pension fund over a period of 10 years, and you essentially went 10 or 11 years and the fund's condition didn't change, I think you might have something to answer for.
Right.
And that might specifically describe our current treasurer, who is the guy that seems to be leading the pack in the congressional race for District 2. We'll have a lot more to say about that in the next few weeks.
Well, I hope you do come back and say more and are specific about what you intend to do. We're wrapping up the show for tonight, Spencer.
Well, sometimes when it comes to strategy, you can't be too specific. And I feel as though when it comes to sticking my neck out.
But I think our viewers want to know, what specifically your intentions are, what specifically you plan to do.
We have an 8-week campaign ahead of us. Do they want it all in the first TV show?
Yeah.
The first appearance?
Yes.
I mean, maybe they do, but a lot of these issues take time. And by the way, I'd be more than happy to give you an hour on the Superman building, but... All
right, well, we're going to have you back if you'd like to come back. The primary is September 13th. Thanks for watching State of the State. Remember that you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and our new Instagram account, State of the State RI. I'm Darlene DeRezzo.